Next up is Roman. Roman and I have known each other for a couple of years. He is a testing expert. He was an early adopter of Vue, and he brought Vue into CodeShip. And he is an engineering manager at CodeShip. So I guess that means you could call him a testpert, test expert, jestpert. All right, Roman, come on up.
I think my presentation just went away. Technical difficulties, 1 second. That's always a great start. That's always a great start. So here we are now. Should be good now, should be good now. Should we? Yep. We're good up? Good. Rob, cool, thank you for the warm welcome, Jacob. Yeah, I'm here today to talk to you and probably bore you a little bit about testing. I'm very sorry. The only kind of thing I have to offer is my soothing voice, as I'm now have a cold since 2 days as well. So yeah, I'll try my best. Against the odds, should you still enjoy something of the talk, I'm very sorry, you can catch me afterwards. I'll try to keep it as dry as possible, ideally. So let's dive into it, right? So yeah, hi, I'm Roman. You can find me on Twitter and @CodeBrio. I know it's an odd name. We can talk about it as well a little later. And yeah, I jumped on Vue very early, but what I'm doing right now is I'm working at CodeShip, and we're part of the CloudBees company family. What's fun? And we're all in the CI/CD market, so we do continuous testing, delivery, and for this reason, probably testing is part of my day-to-day job, and for some reason, I start to really like it and love it, and that's probably why I talk about it today. And as mentioned, we jumped in Vue in very, very early days. It was 0.11, and we released it basically into production and said, okay, we need it, we're going to use it on one page. And of course, testing was very, very important for us. And there was no great way of testing Vue applications at this point. I built something that's called Review. I thought it was a super smart name. It has Vue in it, and kind of it's reviewing it. Then I built it, and I pushed it, and then I realized, oh, there's an NPM package out there that's called Review, and it's like Redux in Vue, so that was a little bit annoying. So I called it Review Testing. And at least it helped also to test Vue applications in a nice way. And eventually, a lot of people started to go into the testing space in Vue. And at one point, everybody bundled forces, and we came up with Vue test utils. So Ed was the main contributor in this one, and luckily it's out there, and it's a super solid tool to use. We use it on our day-to-day basis now. This leaves me what to build next. I don't know, because Vue test utils is just super amazing. Who of you has used Vue test utils so far? That's exciting. So many people adopting it. That's cool. So the cool thing is we can now move forward and build on top of it, what's super great for us. The important part is we jumped on Jest somewhere along the way and said, okay, that seems like the right tool to use. And we're on it since, and I absolutely adore and love Jest for many, many reasons. One reason is, for example, snapshots. I really like snapshots. If you have never heard or used Jest snapshots so far, think of it, it's like part of your application. You run it, or just your component or Vue app, and then you just pick out one piece, you look at it or so, and it takes this snapshot and stores it away. Underneath the hood, just to see some code there, it's just really any kind of object or JavaScript, it just gets stringified and you store a string of it away. Sounds super fancy, it's quite simple, but extremely powerful. And this is one thing I really fell in love with in Jest and using it. And the other thing I really like in testing is randomness. Like you notice, you get this designs from a designer, and there's like some test data that you have prepared, and then eventually reality looks very different often, and you don't want to come into this situation. And this is why I really love to put some randomness in my tests as well to catch these kind of things early. So there's one tool I can totally recommend and really like is as well Faker. And if you've never used or seen Faker so far, this is how it looks. You can basically say Faker, in this case a name, there's like different ways you can find names, job titles, it has numbers, it has dates, like anything you want to kind of like fake and have some random values in there, it's super nice. The big challenge there was, okay, how to test it properly. And after digging a little deeper and some updates later in Jest, it's super easy today because there's something called property matchers. And the cool thing, again, property matchers work flawlessly with snapshots. So that's exciting. And how this looks like is we can now expect and we match something with a custom snapshot. And we can expect like a string and a number. So we can really outline how everything should look like. And that is quite good and gives us some allowance to be random in our data, kind of don't, or break some things along the way, but we still have our tests that back us up. What's nice. This is how the snapshot then looks like. So we really can have the string version of it and say, okay, yeah, it's there, and we have any number string and this kind of things. Cool, let's jump right into some Vue stuff. In this case, let's test the VUEX store. This was one of the first things we really tried to tackle and kind of solve in a nice way. And what always helps me is trying to break down what I want to test. In this case, I looked at the store structure. And in this case, it's like just a state, what's a plain object. We have the mutations, what are simple functions, basically. The actions are a little bit more funky functions. And then we have getters, what are basically computer properties. And here's my store, where I say, okay, I want to add things to my fridge, for example. Not super inventive or creative or super powerful, but it gives us a good way of testing something. The first thing I want to do is, like, again, have this default structure and have a matcher there. And again, I can use this property matcher, so I can start to use the VUEX store with this kind of thing and kind of outline the state, how it should look like, and have a good fallback, basically. The next thing is the mutation. What's probably more interesting, there we just try to get the state and the mutations directly from the store, and then we test the mutation in a very simple way. We just call it directly, and then we check if like the state has correctly updated, and we actually have ice cream in our fridge. Well, it's always good to have ice cream in your fridge. The next thing is I also want to add a number in there. I don't know why, but it should probably be possible because we don't test against it. And let's see if this works as well. And this one completely fails for me because like suddenly I have ice cream and a 2 in my fridge. What's probably not what I wanted. So why is this happening? That's because we kind of didn't clear up the state apparently, and we pull it along from our test. And this is something that happens quite often in the beginning of testing. And the easiest thing for us right now is like we just use a before each function in Jest. We can loop it and then run like an extra piece of code before each test, and we just kind of create a new state. This is like the simplest way we say you want to go with plain JavaScript. You just kind of copy, paste it, clone the object. You can do it simpler. But an even better solution is you can use the state by function. And if you didn't know, like I stumbled a bit very, very late in Vue, to be honest. So it's kind of embarrassing. But you can use like the data in a Vue component always with the function, like that's the requirement. But you can also use the same thing in VUEX and have the state called by a function. What kind of fixes this to one degree. And this kind of makes our before each loop a little cleaner, a little nicer. So that's great. But then something else happened to us. We start to move the collection out of our initial state of the component. And that was kind of like a little weird, because suddenly all our tests started breaking. So I had this like test, this special collection on steroids, basically, and I tested everything that this collection probably works, and then just wired up the things. And eventually it's all good, and then it kind of hit me, and nothing works anymore. It was like super, super embarrassing. And yeah, very, very unexpected, very unexpected. And then I started to dive a little deeper. Why is this actually happening? And I'm not sure if you ever looked into how kind of Node itself works when you require files, but I looked at it and tried to understand what's happening. And basically what it is, if a file requires something else, like pulls in another file, What Node does, it kind of like goes there, calls the cache calls the file, and then reserves it or returns it correctly. Well, what happens if we have another file or somewhere else kind of calling the same desired file? We want to pull it in again. What happens there is we hit the cache directly and we just get the cached file. So our collection was running somewhere and then was like just instantiated once. So we had always the same pointer, the same array. And this happens quite often when you have like complex applications and things come from different worlds. The simplest fix there is just reset modules. That was super, super exciting for me to find it because I had my custom cleanup and destroy the cache, explode it in 1,000 pieces. Just reset modules basically does it for you in a cleaner way. That was pretty cool. So what you could do in Jest now is just say after each and every time kind of like reset the modules so I know whenever I require it correctly, but for each now, it will always get a fresh copy. So whatever complex code you're having and kind of like maybe some requirements across it, this will help you fix all of those in a very simple and easy way. Let's look at actions. We updated our store, and now we have this super awesome action that allows us to kind of store more ingredients because we don't want to use the mutation directly. Testing actions, we said this is a little bit different because like they're not simple functions. They kind of have some requirements how to use it. Luckily, also quite easy in Jest. So what we can do is we just kind of call our actions, and then we define our own store object. We try to mock the parts we care for. In this case, the commit function will be called in this action. And here again, I can use Jest in a very simple way and use the Jest function, what comes with everything you need from kind of a mocked function or class or anything. It's like super, super powerful. And what we can then do is just when we call our action directly from the store, we pass in our own store object where we have full control over. And then we can expect that it was called correctly and test everything that's on it. And yeah, that's quite simple and easy. Just a little gotcha there. Here we did another test again on the same thing. Also, you need to look out, okay, suddenly this whole, the commit custom function was called twice. So there's also an easy fix for this one. If this kind of like throws you off at one point, you can always call a mock reset at the right point and then just kind of reset it every time so you have really a clean slate to test against, what's also very nice and handy. But actions in real life aren't always that simple. Very often you have like asynchronous code. You want to run like code that's, yeah, kind of asynchronous, and you want to test it quite easily as well. You don't want to go in like to crazy land and reinvent the wheel completely. Luckily, Jest also has you covered on this front. You can just have an async test there and wait actually for this action to be called and run correctly. And then again, we can call our expect. And this works flawlessly. But what happens if we throw in another mix, like one of our, I would say, precious libraries, Axios? I guess most people use it in one way or the other, or have heard of it at least. We have it all over the place, Axios. And this was another challenge I at least knew from the other things before I started using Jest. Is, okay, I was so Xenon, not sure if anybody knows it. That was like super, super painful. You have to have your mock server and spin it up and then react to any kind of calls. I want to have a simpler way. And after some digging, you also find there's a super simple solution in Jest. What's very nice. We can just tell Jest to mock Axios. And this uses Jest's auto-mock capabilities, basically. And what we do is we then import Axios. And Jest will go take this object there, and on the first level, it will replace everything basically with a Jest function spy that still allows you to call it, but you can then interact with your Axios library in a different way. So we can then say, for the get function, if it's called, we can mock the resolved value, in this case, from the promise what it's still returning. And our test isn't much more complicated, but we can use the library as is. That's great. What we ended up doing then, though, is we moved Axios to a little bit to the next level, basically, as well, in adding, okay, our custom implementation. This is what Axios makes it powerful, what I really, really like about it. We have our custom headers, some XSS, XCSRF tokens, and a lot of other things we did on top of it. And then we have our custom exports, basically, to mimic the same behavior that Axios does. What's nice there is in Jest you can use your manual mocks. And in this case, if you create a mock file, or the custom mock, sorry. If you create the mock file in another folder that they call like underscore, underscore, mocks, underscore, underscore, for some reason it's always like 2 underscores on each side. They will call the same, we create the same library in the same folder, and then if we tell like Jest to mock this file, it will automatically pick this one up. What's super exciting for us, because here we have, again, the way of like completely changing how this whole element works. And we have our custom export function where we even add and sneaked in an extra function that does some stuff on top. This allows us to clean up our tests even further, because we can then say, okay, Ajax set the response for whatever is going on to like this kind of data. I use builds because I have to do with builds on a daily basis in my work, so for some reason my brain is all builds sometimes. We can even test now ways of kind of testing errors if like the Ajax fails. What's super, super handy and kind of like really forcing an error to happen while testing your code. Isn't that easy always? With the custom mocks, it's super, super simple to do. What's nice. The next thing is getters, our computer properties. And this is where I have to say, okay, don't test getters. Like, at least for me, like it does not make a lot of sense. They're basically to do what they do. And if you really try to be good at testing and efficient, you should also always know what not to test and what to avoid. Because like, yeah, time is money and we don't have so much time to write all the tests. Cool. Let's dive a little deeper. Components is another interesting topic. Here I have this super awesome component. Again, a fridge. Maybe you see I'm kind of like having this weird addiction to food in some way. I mean, even James, like one of the organizers here, like the first thing I wrote to him today when I came from the airport is, when is lunch? So kind of like food is important. No, not sure. I hope everybody can relate to this in one way. So this is my cool component I did. And here we have like some data we want to use. We have some props that we're going to use. We have some methods. Oh, I'm standing in the picture. Cool. And we have an asynchronous up method. We have our show alert, which has like this timeout. So it's just a little component that's had a lot of different things that we could look for. If you don't have a mental picture of it from just looking at the code, this is how the component looks with a little bit of extra class styling on top of it. Basically, we have an input field. We can click on a button, and we can see everything in the list. Super exciting. The interesting part is, how can I test this in an interesting and appealing way that I don't have to write a lot of useless tests, but efficient tests? One of the things is that maybe is interesting is you want to have the default template of this one running. What's the HTML that this component generates for you when it's filled with all the data? And then, depending on how familiar you are with Vue, test utils, but this is how you have to kind of like mount the whole component. When you want to use like VUEX, you have to create the local view, this kind of thing. And eventually, we just want to say, expect the wrapper HTML to match a snapshot. If you're super annoyed by writing wrapper.html every single time, there's a cool package I can totally recommend. It's called Just Serializer View. It allows you to just paste in the wrapper and does the same thing for you. What's quite nice, a little less code we have to write. The next one is, we have our default template. We have updated to just paste in the wrapper. And this is the snapshot it generates. So that gives us like some certainty. We see what is going on there. The next step, what we could do, is we can test that the alert get actually rendered. Right now, it's already a little hard to see, okay, what is different to the previous test? If we look, okay, it's like actually this alert. The alert was the only addition. And then we have like this snapshot, and again, it's like, okay, what is the important data that I care for? So this is not great. Let's see if we can make this better. But the first thing that I guess a few people of you will sit in their chairs, cringe, and kind of feel pain and agony. There's a lot of duplication right now. Of course, we learned about this before each stuff in Jest, and that works, but that's not really great. There's another pattern I want to introduce and show you. It's called factories. I'm not sure, I don't read about it very often in JavaScript. I came from it from the Ruby side. There's a lot of things they would do with factory when testing. And a factory is just like a function that prepares some data for you. It's kind of pretty cool if you kind of grasp the concept behind it. So let's quickly jump into it, and maybe it's something for you. So a factory could be the same thing that we did before, where we create our Vue instance, or where we define everything that we want to mount on the page, and we just move it in an extra function that we call factory, nothing more. What this allows us, it already cleans up our tests by a lot. Like we can say the factory, just call it explicitly, and then it's there. And our tests, they do the same thing as before, but they're already way cleaner, right? The big difference here to don't do it with before each is suddenly I call factory, so I have kind of control to what's going on. This is nice because we could then extend our factory with maybe like some props or options. And this allows them to write like tests like this, where I say okay, factory, and then we just pass in props right away. And this is a very convenient and easy way of like testing more complex scenarios. We could even kind of bring it to the next level and pull out the store into an extra factory function. And yeah, it looks a little cleaner. The nice way is we could now even separate those in different files and can extend each thing individually on their own. What's nice is our factories, as they live now in different files, we have this very clean kind of separation layer. We can pull everything together where we need it. And then inside our tests, we can then just pull in the things that we actually really care for. And that's pretty interesting so far, I hope. At least for me, it was very, very helpful. But I wanted to bring it a little further. I needed a little bit more flexibility on this one. And what we could do is we create an extra function that's called create factory. And what it does, it just returns a factory function for us. I know that's quite a lot, but that's kind of like nice and easy and cozy way of like preparing an extra layer for us of flexibility. And while we edit, because we're in the factories index file, we can just import the store and export it again as a default. Because if we automatically call it there, in our test, we can call the create factory and store factory right away from the same file, what's also a little nicer when working with it. So in my test file, I can actually then call the factory and create one and do it and manage it in whatever way I like. What's exciting. And again, we can take the props. There's just a little minor addition that we need to do, is why we now pass in props directly as a key. But again, this is like more flexibility for us down the road and a very simple API to even generate a lot of powerful components and tests. Good. Let's look at the methods. Those are the methods we had in our component. I just put it back up on screen again to see what's going on. Let's look at the first one, the order methods. It's an asynchronous one. It kind of like tries to call another function eventually. Okay. The test for this one is also quite easy again. We can call async. And in this case, as this one is then calling the alert, we just will tell Jest to use the fake timers to kind of roll forward every timeout that's on the page eventually. And then we set all the data that we want to do. We call the function directly, and then we can say run all timers. The nice thing here again with our factory, we can directly kind of export VM, like the view model in this way. And yeah, I think we get a lot of a lot of benefits with this kind of testing structure and still kind of maintaining readability by testing a lot of functionality. And with this whole create factory function, the first time I started doing it, it was more like, okay, that's quite a lot to take in, and took me a little restructuring every now and then or so, but eventually it's kind of like, okay, clicked, and I kind of really, really like it so far. So I can very much recommend to give it a try. But so far what we did, we just looked at unit tests, and we said, okay, we want to do like next level testing, kind of bring it up a little bit. And most of the documentation I see for Jest and everything is like very much focused on unit tests. But I want to go to a level, I want to do like kind of like acceptance tests with Vue. Acceptance test is basically following like a user story, like a more complex flow to really go through the component or the application, doing a few things at once, and then having like one test that gives me a great assurance that this whole piece of code works and not just like one little unit in there. How could we do this? A simple acceptance test could look like this. First of all, we want to set up the application. Then we want to store the initial snapshot. We want to know how the HTML actually looks like on the page. And then we want to fill the input and click the button accordingly. Then we might want to take a new snapshot that shows the alert. And then we want to kind of wait the alert to actually disappear. And then we want to take one final snapshot. this is great. Cool, how can we do this? Again, we kind of do the setup section in our test. And the interesting part is we need to get the input and the button out of our kind of view instance. What's a little bit, annoying, we need to do it this way, but it's fine. We just assign the input and the button for now. Next one is we want to take the initial snapshot, so let's do this. Then we want to change the value on the input field to say, okay, like the user kind of manages or adds something into the field. In this case, to make it like work and react to it accordingly, we have to manually trigger that there is an input event happening, and then we're going to do button and trigger the click event on this one to kind of mimic what the user is actually doing. And this is where we want to take another snapshot, and we're going to do flash promises before. If you've never heard or seen flash promises, it's a super nice, simple NPM package that just takes like all the promises that are floating around in your application, resolves them to you, and then just continues the code. And if we await for this one, this makes it like so much easier to still write like this one indented level code, and you don't have to kind of go through the promise hell yourself. What's very, very nice to work with. And then again, we want to kind of speed up all timers, and then we take the final snapshot. So, yeah, that's super great. What we see here is like this is the snapshots that we generated, and actually the first thing I saw is, okay, like that's not great, I don't really like it. It's super hard to see actually what was going on, what is the big change I should look for. This is a super simple application, we can grasp what's on the screen here, but I guess like every component or application that you're going to write is much more complex than this little piece of code. So what is the value in this? Cool. The first one, we care probably for everything that's on the page. In the second snapshot, I care actually just for this alert and this kind of field to be down there in the list accordingly. And for the third one, I just care that actually the span is kind of back to empty again. Okay, how can I come to the point that I just see this in my snapshots? Cool. There's two things I want to introduce, and that's like snapshot diff and then the view snap serializer. But two very helpful libraries, the way that we can use it inside our code, and you don't have to read all of it. The important piece is we need to track like our current snapshot, what's the next snapshot, and what is the diff looking like, and then we just kind of assign the current one with view snap, and it takes this serialized snapshot, what's quite great for us. The next snapshot that we take in the page where we say, okay, like after setting the alert and everything and input trigger, then we want to create a next snapshot, what again like serializes how the markup looks right now. Then we take the diff, then we call snapshot diff to take those two, merge it together, show me what's actually the different on this one. Then we have to reassign the current one to next, and then we can expect the diff to match the snapshot. Okay, that's super awesome. The code is a lot, but like our output in the snapshot is way, way better. We're in this like GitHub PR diffing, where you say, okay, exactly on which line what changed. You say, okay, this one was added, on the first one, this one was removed, and the second line was added. So it's like very valuable, at least in this level. And even on the third test, you see that it's not printing the whole markup anymore, but just like the line that actually changed the snapshot. So this gives us some cool overview over everything. But I thought we could take it one level up. And that's where we start to build a library that's called Jest acceptance, and just kind of takes everything that we learned so far and just kind of builds on top of it. So the way that you can use it actually is just say, okay, we use our tester is like now the new thing that we added to the stack. And in this case, we just pass in the view app that we want to test eventually. So we want to take the initial snapshot, what says, okay, tester, give me the current snapshot, and it kind of gives me this whole thing. Then I want to interact with my input field and with the button and this on the page. So I just fill in the ingredient with a value, and I fill in the button. And you also maybe see that you don't have to kind of assign the button and the input up front. We can just directly say, okay, what do you want to use? And if the element has an ID, you can pass in like a ID selector, the way that you would kind of initially just use something like this organically, I guess. Then we want to have the next snapshot. Once again, we call just say tester next, and we get like this next snapshot. Give me the next version of it. And we don't have to reset it to current or anything else. We just focus on what we actually want to test. And eventually, we then say, OK, just run all timers, and then give me the final next snapshot. What's the last one in this case? And what we see here is like the same kind of result in a very clean way. And for us, like the biggest win on this one was we were able to kind of cut down the amount of tests we write by a lot, because we can test a lot of miles in one simple test, follow through a lot of things, how components work, how like exercise the whole stack of the Vue component, the store, and everything else. And that's quite nice. And with this, I'll leave you. Say thank you for listening.
Wow. Thanks, Roman.